Yeah.
Hello my friends. Due to technical difficulties, war explosions and blast at night, spraying of skies with chemicals, we have a very bad weather, constant rain, wind and clouds. That's why I decided to change some plans and make my first impressions video about all three phones. Otherwise it will be additional week, if not a month. Because right now I cannot test these devices in sunny conditions or with astrophotography. I will show what I have in these conditions. That's why it will be not very long and in-depth review, without any flashy edits. Oh, maybe only a little bit. Oppo Find X8 Ultra, Xiaomi 15 Ultra, Vivo x200 Ultra. At first I thought that design will be very similar, but touching them in person, they are kind of very different, not only in terms of look, but handling. There are lots of cool new features and upgrades this year, but also questionable downgrades. If I have to explain, feels like Oppo made a nice step forward. There is nothing breakthrough, but feels like everything became slightly more polished. Everything that was good is still present. Lots of small problems were fixed. I enjoy using this device the same as last year, and some of its features makes it a very nice contender to be one of the best smartphones on the market. Xiaomi, they actually made two giant leaps forward, and unfortunately one step back, which for some people will be very small and even unnoticeable. But this year I am very impressed with Xiaomi 15 Ultra, and looks like it is the most improved 2025 phone compared to previous models. During these 2 weeks I enjoyed to use it so much that had a thought of using it as my main daily device. Almost everything that I had problems with was fixed. I called Xiaomi 14 Ultra a phone with the best balance last year, and now feels like it is even more true. Vivo x200 Ultra. Oh, my poor beloved Vivo. Why are you doing this to me? Even before we go further, you cannot be wrong with any of these devices. All three of them will give you stellar performance, beautiful images. Last year Vivo made a revolution. First 1/1.4 inches telephoto lens, larger than some main sensors on other brands. I even used it as my daily device. And now again. First 1/1.3 inches ultrawide lens. Second revolution. Kinda. But, Vivo fans, please be calm. It is just my personal opinions. X200 Ultra feels like 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. A very beautiful and mature design of the body, with largest camera bump ever, that consists of top-tier modern technology that exists in a smartphone market. A desire to own this phone as a main device quickly changed to a confusion raised eyebrows, and just one question. Why? Why it has to be like this? And again, do not get me wrong, it is very nice solid device, and definitely big improvements versus X200 Pro. But comparing it to X100 Ultra, last year model, it feels like a hit and miss. In some areas I see improvements, in some stagnation, in some even noticeable downgrade, but in some straight up a deal breaker. That makes me hard to recommend it to already existing Vivo users, especially considering such a high price tag. Last year I called Vivo best camera phone, and looks like I cannot call it this year. One of the best, definitely. But its crown is at question. Of course, I'm talking about general use and photography. Video recording, on the other hand, is completely different story. And Vivo was one of the best in this area. Built-in log recording, good pro video mode. You can easily film a full movie with it, and I'm not joking, by the way. This year Xiaomi has the same, if not better video features. It is good news. Bad news that it, for the most part, applies to log footage only, and you need to learn color grading. At first I thought that Oppo was lagging behind in video department. When I used this phone during these 2 weeks, there were no actual dedicated pro video mode and log recording, only gimmicky film mode with black bars on top and bottom. But after I have downloaded latest firmware update, they have actually changed that useless film mode to dedicated pro video mode with its own log recording. That looks very promising. Unfortunately, I have already recorded couple of examples on basic auto video mode and third-party Rec 709, but I need to learn how to properly expose and grade this logarithmic footage anyway. It will take some time, and I will definitely explore log recording in the next videos. Maybe even release luts for my Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee supporters. I'm really impressed with all 3 phones in terms of video features. But to test video for the full potential, I need to have at least one sunny day. Subscribe not to miss out future videos with these 3 new powerful devices. We will compare it against very expensive, best modern 15 megapixels full-frame camera. We will have street photography and videography videos on all of these 3 phones. And of course, fully multi-hours in-depth battle, as always. With new tests, photo, video, audio comparisons. For the most part, I'm interested in the most stressful, tricky conditions, because in a good light, even budget smartphones, iPhones, Samsungs can produce usable results. And of course, I want to know, did they fix the problems of the last year? Oppo had big problems with backlight, with artifacts, some weird behavior with telephoto, and bad night mode. Xiaomi had also some instability with telephoto. Can it be fixed with the same HP9 that Vivo had? And those weird backlight contours, Sharingan eyes. Vivo x200 Ultra had the least amount of problems, but after x200 Pro, I have a very bad feelings, and I want to know, what did they ruin this time? Or perhaps not? This and next month, you will explore it with me. And now I want to show you some photo examples, just a small amount, to get a first impressions and general idea. Alright my friends, let's start from colors and color profiles. Here we have this 2025 year Xiaomi 15 Ultra. On your left you can see it. This color profile is called Leica Vibrant, and in the middle is Leica Authentic. Vibrant is very bright. It lifts the shadows, revealing all the information. And we can see lots of colors and saturation, while Authentic is more toned down. It is more contrasty, shadows are more dark. It is moody and has small amount of vignette on the corners. By the way, I found a way to combine both of these approaches. In the photo mode, in the bottom you can see the filters button. You can select one of the 2 color profiles and select vivid colors on top of it. This way you will get best of both worlds. Very moody contrasty image, but with lots of colors and saturation levels. Very vibrant. It is a cool trick if you want to experiment even more. As you can see, Leica Authentic is slightly more toned down in terms of artificial level of details. Leica Vibrant applies slightly more computational algorithms. You can see this on this black and white dots and lines, on this wood. Leica Authentic is more toned down. Shadows are more dark on the Authentic. Here I applied vivid colors on top of Leica Authentic and we can get even more dark shadows. By the way, it has second filter or film simulation that is called natural. It is very unique and moody, but I don't think that I'm a big fan of it, because it is kind of depressive and sad. But you can get pretty unique results with it, especially if you combine it with Authentic. Now, Vivo x200 Ultra. It is the same as last year's model. On your left we have vivid color profile. As you can see, it is very bright, very colorful and saturated, but also it has some pop. I like that it has very nice object separation, foreground from background. Image looks three-dimensional. In the middle we have textured. It is a lot more contrasty, a lot more dark and moody, but it sometimes can lean towards warm colors. And you can face some problems, especially if your subject has a tan. Faces can become slightly too orange in some rare occasions, but you can counterbalance it with white balance. In the pro photo mode, sort of in the humanistic street photography, but to tell the truth, in this state, humanistic street photography mode is kinda dead for me. On your right, it is Zeiss natural color profile. It is a lot more toned down, less saturated, and has low level of contrast. Image becomes slightly more gray, like your film got fade out. Last year, X100 series applied less aggressive computation on Zeiss natural. But this year, X200 series kinda went berserk with this very aggressive, almost fakery computation. Textured is a lot more dark and moody. Also this year, Vivo got this additional interesting color profile. It is a film simulation and called classical negative. You can see this emerald foliage and grass. I used to love to edit my films and my DSLR raw photos like this very long ago. And it reminds me on one of the filters that Oppo smartphones have. Oppo. It does not have the same color profiles as on other smartphones. On your left is the original color profile, but it actually has some Hasselblad-style film simulations. In the middle it is called Fresh. You can see that it is a lot more moody and dark, and we have a very big shift in terms of colors of the green. The same goes to your right. This film simulation is called Clear. It also has this mood, but less dark, and it leans a little bit on the warm side compared to the Fresh. I love that Oppo is kinda soft, but still preserves all the details necessary. It does not overwhelm you with artificial fake AI upscaling, unless you press second telephoto lens. But we will check it later. Also, it has this additional film simulation. It is very similar to what Vivo has, with its new film colors, but here it is directly called Emerald. And I love this a lot. To tell the truth, sometimes I grade my RAW files from real mirrorless cameras exactly in this style, with very emerald foliage. I absolutely love this style. So here that I will use during these photo reviews. On Oppo we will use Hasselblad Original, because other color profiles are too artistic and very situational. On Xiaomi, this time I will actually use Leica Authentic, because why not? It looks very organic and natural, and I absolutely love this color profile. On Vivo we will use Vivid color profile, because textured is not for everyone, and Zeiss Natural is not my favorite, to tell the truth. I always find myself wanting to add more contrast and saturation after taking photos with Zeiss Natural. So, during the whole review, I will use these color profiles. If I use something different, I will tell you before we start. Now let's start from portrait comparison, as well as checking out these new ultrawide lenses on all of these smartphones. Oppo has slightly more tight 15mm. Xiaomi, unfortunately, it is one step back. It lost 12mm ultrawide lens, now it is more tight 14, but theoretically it should be better. And the star of the show, Vivo x200 Ultra. Right now it has the largest sensor size among all the ultrawide lenses on the market. Actually the size is the same as main lens on some budget smartphones, something like iPhone 16 Pro Max, Galaxy S25 Ultra, on smartphones like Sony Xperia 1 Mark VI, or maybe at this point in time, 1 Mark 7. So on the paper it should be a lot better. But after very intensive testing, I found out that sometimes, yes, I can see the advantage, but sometimes it is very similar, almost undistinguishable. And in some situations, Actually, Vivo x100 Ultra is better. But it is for the most part because of new Vivo's very weird artificial computation. It is very aggressive and can lead to unpredictable results. By the way, what is going on with the contrast levels on X100 Ultra? Maybe I need to clean the camera bump from dust? But I can see that this is new computation from Vivo. It applies a lot more dehazing, and overall contrast levels looks better. And whoa, what a nice job! Look at this Oppo. So nice levels of contrast, and colors and color gradients of the skin. It reminds me of real cameras. Good job, Oppo. Also, I want you to pay attention to this texture of the clothes. Look how rough it is. Looks like it has the most amount of details among all of them, but in reality it's actually an illusion. This texture is fake and drawn by AI computation. None of these textures exist in reality. It is just too aggressive. If we zoom in even more, you can see these very weird spiral-like distortions, those patches of black dots. They are everywhere, almost across the whole image, and for the most part in the shadows. I will explain you why it is like this. There are two types of noise on the images. First one is color noise, red, blue and green dots, and second part is luma noise. It looks like black and white grain on your image, and if you apply too much luma noise reduction in your editing software, you will actually get these spirals inside shadow parts. And those spirals, it is just a result of very aggressive noise reduction, and all these patches are pretty much unfixable. That's why I don't understand Vivo team. They have a cooperation with Zeiss. So much talks about convectional real photography, but whose idea was to apply so much aggressive unfixable editing, tons of noise reduction, and as a result, lots of artifacts, distortions. On this image, you can spot them only if you zoom in, but I will show you in the dedicated Vivo x200 review that on some situations you will just get unusable results, and those patches across the whole image, especially in low light. This problem, for the most part, affects ultrawide lens. If you use main sensor and telephoto, those problems will have less presence. So, can we spot any advantage versus Vivo x100 Ultra? And yeah, maybe, sort of. It has more details, but I'm not sure. Are they real? Do they exist in reality? Or is this all just a computational trickery? Because please, look at Oppo. Actually, I think that it is more detailed than Vivo. This is actually how those leaves should look like in reality. They are very smooth, not like rough paper. Again, I can see these weird spiral distortions in the shadow parts. I'm really trying hard right now to find the advantage for X200 Ultra, but I kinda having a hard time. Maybe contrast levels and colors are noticeably better in this area. You know, the fun part that I think that Oppo is kinda better and more detailed than those fake drawn details on X200 Ultra. In this particular shot, I can see advantages over X100 Ultra. Unfortunately, the weather is very bad during these 2 weeks, and looks like next 2 weeks also. I really wish we had at least couple of days of sun. This way I can film sunset portraits, cityscapes, landscapes. I can make some astrophotography and star trails, as well as moon photography. All these smartphones has very nice supermoon mode. By the way, do you know that you can use supermoon feature on the sun? This photo was made from the car while moving. I went to the city from my village. Small window inside clouds. If you are standing on Earth and look at the sun, its relative size is the same as the moon. They appear to be the same in the sky. Both of them are glowing balls of light, and they need exposure correction. So why not to use supermoon feature? Oh, here we are getting a very tricky situation, thanks to Vivo x200 Ultra brought us a nightmare in terms of reviewing all those photos, because now it's lost dedicated 24mm focal length. 24mm is very useful focal distance. Almost all of general zoom lenses start from 24mm. 24 to 70, 24 to 105. You can use it for full body shots that will reveal all your surroundings at the same time. You can film multiple peoples at the same time in one frame, or use it for architectural and street stuff. And to access this focal distance, on X200 Ultra you have to crop on the ultrawide, while Oppo, Xiaomi and Vivo x100 has access to the dedicated 24mm, and it is 1 inch. On ultrawide 14mm, X200 Ultra had an advantage, but here on 24, it is actually worse. It is a trade-off. You get some, you lose some. Even without any zooming in, I can see that we have a lot more background separation on all of these smartphones. But on X200 Ultra, it looks very flat. And background is a lot more in focus. Almost no depth of field whatsoever. By the way, speaking about depth of field, please greet our new technical friend. This is one of the best mirrorless camera on the market that money can buy right now. It is full frame, 15 megapixels, Canon R5 Mark II. I'm using one of the best general zoom lenses, Canon L series 24 to 70 f2.8 Mark II. This lens alone cost more than any of these smartphones, and lens plus body cost more than all these 4 phones combined. So very expensive piece of equipment. I will use it instead of Sony ZV-10, APS-C small camera that could not keep up with these modern smartphones. It had very bad dynamic range, noise levels, and in many occasions was even worse than smartphones. So during this year we will find out, can spending more money give you a lot better results? Ultimate raw hardware powers versus clever software computational trickery. So, on X200 Ultra, we can start to see that eyebrows are completely drawn by AI. They are fake and not real. But is it a big deal for you? Do you actually need 24mm? It is only for you to decide. By the way, I feel like skin tones are slightly more accurate on Xiaomi. Of course, now we're talking. Compared to Sony ZV-10, or little Sony, it is just a bloodbath. But I kinda like what Xiaomi did here. Very nice level of details, and gradients of the skin, as well as texture of these clothes. Alright, now we get to the interesting part. 35mm, main lens on all of them. But now everyone else except X200 Ultra use digital crop. It is a new sensor on X200 Ultra, Sony LYT81 whatever. It is not 1 inch, but it is pretty large, 1/1.3, with optical dedicated 35mm lens. But here is a question, is it drastically better, or you can get away with using digital crop on 1 inch 24mm lenses? Oppo is absolutely not consistent with its contrast levels. Looks like it has some problems as previous year, X7 Ultra. But maybe it is on purpose, who knows? I absolutely love this year's Xiaomi. What a beautiful rendering with these colors, contrast levels and separation. But without any zooming in, I cannot see this drastic advantage in terms of background blur on X200. Let's not forget about our full frame Canon camera. I set this lens for optical 35mm zoom. This is a prime example of why you want to use a good camera with nice lens that has good coatings on it, over smaller bad APS-C cameras, and of course smartphones. Especially it is very noticeable during this very bad lighting condition in the cloudy day. And the biggest reasons are bad contrast levels and color gradients. For some reason all these camera brands, despite having Zeiss cooperation, Leica, Hasselblad, in some situations they are almost unusable without GCam modes. And even then they have some limitations. But I will say that here I kinda like what Xiaomi does in terms of overall feelings, contrast and colors. And actually I kinda don't see any reason why would I want to use this optical 35mm lens or a digital crop on these 24mm 1-inch sensors. Not in terms of details, not in terms of background blur. Improved contrast levels for the most part is a software feature with more dehazing applied, but maybe the improved coatings on these new lenses, who knows? But also what I have noticed, sometimes on X200 Ultra, I can see black, brown, red and orange dots across the face and the whole skin. On this example, looks like everything is fine. And it is definitely not to the same extent as on X200 Pro, where those dots were uncontrollable and sometimes ruined portraits. But still, sometimes those weird dots from this computation appears on the skin. Especially it is noticeable on the pores. But on this particular scenario, everything looks fine. So, I don't see the huge advantage for this optical 35mm on X200 Ultra, but also I do not see any disadvantage. That is very good news. It is pretty safe to say that X200 Pro kinda had very bad optics that could not handle this very weird aggressive new computation from Vivo. It is so cool. On this 15 megapixels full frame camera, you can zoom in, and you are getting tons of actual real resolution. Of course, all of these smartphones are using 12 megapixels. It is the same as 4K video resolution, and 15 megapixels is similar to the 8K video resolution. We will compare 15 megapixel computational RAW on these smartphones in the full battle, hopefully next month. Now, let's use 50 megapixel focal distance. Maybe in this situation, X200 Ultra will show its huge advantage, because it crops only slightly. Let's zoom in optically on Canon, 50 megapixels f2.8. The best contrast levels are on Xiaomi and X200 Ultra. Actually, I love that this year they are trying to improve it. Alright. Actually, I don't see nothing bad on the digital crop of this new lens. Oppo is very weird with this very low contrast levels, despite having very organic natural details. Those contrast is kinda annoying. And now, very interesting part, let's compare telephoto lenses. Both Vivos have only one. It is very large, HP9 1/1.4 inches. But Oppo and Xiaomi has two dedicated telephoto lenses. And Xiaomi also has this HP9 lens, but it is a second one. First one is 70mm f1.8. I can see that Oppo has improved contrast a lot. It tells me that something is very wrong with coatings on the glass on main sensor. Both Vivos have very nice contrast levels, but I think that X200 Ultra is just ever so slightly better, but not by a mile. This year they have lowered the aperture. Now it is f2.3. Maybe we can even see good low light performance. Let's use maximum zoom level on Canon lens, 70mm f2.8. Each time I look at these photos, it reminds me of my old Canon 5D Mark II. My first real mirrorless camera after the film era. And now, everything returned to its roots, but in more advanced and polished body. You can see that second eye on the Canon is blurry because it is out of focus. I focused on this eye, and on full frame body, f2.8 aperture has very shallow and small focal plane. That's why this eye is in focus, and second is already not. You need to be very accurate. I suggest to close aperture to f4. Both Vivos are very nice, but looks like X200 Ultra is ever so slightly more aggressive. But you notice it only when you zoom in that much. I love Oppo here. Oppo is very strong in portraits. But of course, in such lightning condition, I will definitely use Gcam mode, because it will bring already nice image of the smartphones closer to what conventional mirrorless DSLR camera can give you. I will try my best to find Gcam modes on X200, Xiaomi, Oppo, if it even exists at this point in time, and show you results on dedicated reviews of these smartphones. If not, I will just compare it against Gcam mode on X100 Ultra. It reminds me of RF lenses versus EF. By the way, it is blurred just because of shallow depth of field. At 70mm, even f2.8 will give you very small room to play around with. Imagine f1.2 lens in this situation. Alright, now second telephoto lenses. On Oppo it is one 35mm optical with f3.1. Xiaomi now uses very large HP9, also optical 100mm. While on both Vivos we need to use digital crop on the same HP9. On Canon I had to zoom in with my feet, because 70mm is the maximum you can get with this general zoom lens. Also, the area where I saw some improvements is macro photography, especially on Oppo. Last year's Find X7 Ultra struggled a lot in this area. It could not focus very close and had some problems with optical image stabilization. And this year I am very pleased with it. Also Xiaomi. Looks like it improved some computation. Last year's 14 Ultra also had lots of problems with artificial AI morphing, distortions and lots of fakery. But also it has one big problem, and actually we will talk about it more later. The problem is that it does not have HDR in super macro mode. And this super macro mode goes only to 2x zoom levels. One workaround that I found is to go into the Pro photo mode. You can actually use one of the telephoto lenses and zoom in specifically on that lens. But again, no HDR and that mode either. You can get access to HDR by switching to the Ultra RAW, but there is no digital crop. I don't understand why these companies remove HDR from certain modes, because HDR means multi-frame stacking. In other words, it is computational photography, and removing this feature makes no sense on smartphones, because it is what makes smartphones so good in the first place, but it is a topic for another video. If you look at X200 Ultra, it is actually very nice and not that bad. But if you start to zoom in, image looks very overprocessed, too smoothed out, no textures, looks like water painting. When last year's X100 Ultra stays very strong in this regard, it is very powerful smartphone for macro photography. But of course, we can see that Oppo is also very aggressive and applies these AI transformations, like last year's, unfortunately. Now, people with arachnophobia, please be careful. If you are afraid of spiders, right now we will test macro capabilities of these new very expensive devices. On this small spider, it is only half a centimeter in size. Skip this section if you are afraid, but we are going further. Again, it was very harsh conditions because it was a shadow during cloudy day. It was very windy, and this web was waving in the wind back and forth pretty hard. It was nearly impossible to take these shots, but I tried my best, and we can stress test them. This year I saw very big improvements on all three of them, in terms of ease of use and handling experience, in terms of image stabilization. It is almost God level on three of them. In terms of autofocus, all three of them have nice subject recognition that stays on the screen, and it actually works. Autofocus tries to focus on what is detected in your frame. Now let's use more zooms to see the details of the carapace of this spider. Now a little bit more zoom. And the most funny part, that actually Xiaomi looks like a lot more natural and organic compared to all of them. My guess is because I'm using Pro mode, it does not have HDR. That's why it does not apply all these weird AI upscalings, all these individual small hairs. Image is just a lot more natural and organic. I really enjoy this photo. Of course, I wish Xiaomi added HDR feature, but I feel like that if they do, we will get something like this show it, instead of nice, organic, natural image. But whatever. In this situation, I will give this to Xiaomi. It is just night and day difference. But please, use your own eyes, your own feelings, and just pick whatever you feel like is better for you. Photography and images are just personal taste. If you like something different, it is completely normal. Now I want to test macro photography on my small musical instrument. It is an old Russian Vargan. I will zoom in on this small part of the snake. Now let's see the close focus distance. Oh, I love those colors on Xiaomi. And looks like X100 Ultra can focus slightly more closer than X200 Ultra. And if we start to zoom in, I can instantly notice how aggressive this new computation of this X200 Ultra is. The more you zoom, the more it starts to look like aquarellic water painting, with very harsh black and white outlines on the all details of this image. And something very weird and aggressive is going on with this background blur, those bokeh balls. They are very weird and busy, very distracting, to tell the truth. Please pay attention to this shadow part. For some reason this year, Vivo lifts shadows just too much and applies very aggressive noise reduction and AI upscaling on top of it. It looks so fake. I'm really not a big fan of this. Also looks like Oppo also applies this AI computation and over-sharpening. But pay attention to these metal parts. They actually looks like metal. And this part, it is very shiny and specular. It really looks like metal. But on X200 Ultra, unfortunately looks like stone and paper. In reality, this metal on this Vargan is very smooth. I'm not a big fan of this background blur on X200 Ultra. For reference, I want to show you the Vivo X100 Ultra but with Gcam mode from Egoist. I love these colors also. Pay attention to this metal, to this texture. This is almost one-to-one representation of how it looks in reality. And now look at X200 Ultra. It looks like childish drawing. You can also notice this small white fur. It is so organic and we can see its shape. While here, it is just a mess. Now let's zoom in 10 times. On X100 Ultra, I will use Gcam mode, because why not? Here I used Pro mode on Xiaomi. It does not have HDR switch there. That's why there is no multi-frame stitching to get this very polished look. And the image is very soft. Alright, my friends, I found out that you actually can zoom in normal photo mode with HDR, but you have to dive into the settings. In the camera settings there is a general tab. Over there is auto adjust lens. And there is adaptive telephoto and adaptive macro. If it's switched off, it will just go beyond first telephoto lens to the second one. Definitely in the next videos and reviews I will use this feature. I don't understand. Here is egoist mode on Gcam. Here is multi-million, multi-billion dollars companies. Why this one man, just a single man that has a hobby, can do this nice of a job? Image looks so natural, so organic. Why cannot these companies that has Hasselblad, Leica, Zeiss, cooperations give us something similar, some sort of a mode or a button? Name it something like natural photography. I don't know, but why produce this garbage? Anyway, aggressive rent is done. On X200 Ultra it is a complete ugly mess. What I am even looking at? While here we can see all these small extra details, all the real textures, and even this small dust. Look how natural and organic this shadow part is. It is 10x digital crop. Xiaomi, please bring HDR on all of your modes. Now even more, 20x digital zoom. When we amplify zoom levels, we amplify sorrow. We are stepping in the abstract art territory. All three of these smartphones are kinda bad in its own way. Oppo, using very strange paper-like computation of AI. Xiaomi does not have any HDR, that's why image is soft, no multi-frame stitching. X200 Ultra is a complete mess. And the one man pushes against all this despair with this nice mode. Insane performance, considering that this is small smartphone that can fit in our pocket. If you think about it, it is crazy. It is 20x digital crop. It is a power of computational photography that conventional mirrorless camera manufacturers looks like will never give us. It looks like it almost invented a web, spider web, that was never existed in reality. I just love this GCam mode. It is very natural and organic. I wish all these smartphone manufacturers had this mode built in. But instead we're getting this total garbage, almost unusable trash. Now I want to test another aspect of telephoto lenses and zoom in far away. Also I want to see text readability. For some reason I don't have Vivo x200 Ultra example. But please don't worry, after I show you this, I will go and redo this test with X200 Ultra included. Instead I will show you GCam mode. Immediately I can see that color representation and textures are miles and miles better on GCam mode. But what is about text readability and overall image quality? Because this test reveals the philosophy and computation that those companies are using. And by the way, it is not an advertisement, but Jacob's Monarch. If you are watching this, I expect a fat paycheck in my bank account. And please pay attention. This text has some distortions. On Vivo it is more readable and clear, while Xiaomi is somewhere in the middle. Also pay attention at these dots. In reality it is small dots, but on Oppo it transformed into some sort of a web with all those lines fused together. Expect unpredictable metamorphosis on the telephoto images on your Oppo. On Oppo, I almost cannot read any of those lines. All letters are fused and welded together. They are very distorted and gives you an illusion of details. While on Vivo they are not very clean, but I can actually read each and every word on all of these lines, even to some extent on this GCam mode. And Xiaomi actually is somewhere in the middle between all of them. I can read almost all of these lines, but they are a lot more distorted, and some words I will have a hard time to understand what they mean. On Oppo, everything is fused together. I cannot read any of this. On Xiaomi, everything is very soft and not readable at all, while on Vivo, I can read each and every word here, despite it being slightly distorted. The same goes on GCam mode. I can read all of this. It is more soft, but less distorted, and more true to life in terms of lines, textures, and also colors. It does not remove this luma grain, thus present the texture of the surfaces. So right now I have repeated this test, but with Vivo x200 Ultra included, X100 Ultra on stock camera app, and GCam mode. So, on Oppo, I can actually read most of these lines. Xiaomi is somewhat soft, not everything is readable, but it can be done. And X200 Ultra is actually a best here. Like all those letters are very defined. I mean compared to all other devices. And it is more defined than X100 Ultra. So the best for text readability here is X200 Ultra and X100 Ultra with GCam mode. But this mode of the X100 Ultra is actually Not even close in terms of color representation and actual textures. It does not remove grain, making the image infinitely more organic and natural. I think that I prefer this over all of them. What is wrong with this cursed uncanny valley from AI? Those grim smiles. And this in the middle, it literally looks like a skull. It reminds me of the movie Final Destination. What is going on with this monstrous alien claw? Oh, this grim smile. Pretty scary. I feel like a little bit more, and something like Pennywise the Clown will jump out of the screen.
Hey, children, I like it down here.
Now we're almost done, my friends. Let's quickly discuss portrait mode with fake background blur and face retouching. After that we will look at the extreme low light condition, extreme night mode, and we are done. On Oppo it has face retouching slider. I have set it to 30%. Anything above that makes the image look weird, with face being overly smoothed out. Xiaomi also has face retouching slider. I have set it to 50%. I find that this amount is pretty much optimal. Vivo x200 Ultra has lots of presets for face retouching and reconstruction. I'm using natural one. And Vivo x200 Ultra unfortunately does not have ultra-wide lens and the portrait mode. That's why we won't be able to have background blur on 24mm. Also, I will use f2.8 simulation on all of them. But my advice is don't use anything lower than that. If anything, I suggest to use f4. You will get a lot more stable results, with better cutouts of your subject. Last year, Oppo Find X7 Ultra was the best in terms of cutting out the hairs and separating it from the background. And this year looks like it is the same, if not better. Look at all these individual hairs. It is the first time I saw this level of performance on Oppo. And now I cannot expect anything less from others. Good job, Oppo. As well as face retouching this year. I love the results. I love contrast levels and color. Big improvements here. Xiaomi, very artistic. I also love this. Looks like it is slightly more rough in terms of cuts on the hairs. Vivo, no comments, no support for ultra-wide lens, thus we cannot use it on digital crop. And Vivo was the king of the portrait mode last year and became my benchmark in this regards, and looks like all the small individual hairs are also very accurately cut out. But I feel like Oppo is just the best here. Nothing funky is going on. Everything is very accurate. It can even convince someone that it was made on a DSLR or mirrorless camera with expensive lens. Yeah, definitely. I feel like the win will go here for Oppo. On Xiaomi you can find some artifacts here and there. But overall, to tell the truth, if you won't zoom in your image that much, if you will use it for printing in the family album or for social media, I guarantee you no one will ever notice these small artifacts, or try to use something like f4 or f5.6. Results will be more stable and predictable. Now 35mm. In theory, X200 Ultra should shine here. All other smartphones will use digital crop. Without any zooming in, I will instantly say that Xiaomi is my favorite in terms of overall feelings. Something about this image, I just love it. Contrast levels and colors and overall mood. I think it is my favorite here. But you, my friends, please pick whatever you like. I feel like all of them are very, very beautiful. You cannot go wrong with any of the smartphones. I can give a point here for X200 Ultra for this level of contrast. Image is three-dimensional. Compared to X100 Ultra, I can see a slight loss of contrast here. Not like a big deal. When I will make a full battle, I will see, maybe I have dust on my lens. But maybe it is just how it is. In terms of hair cutouts, again, Oppo is unmatched, Xiaomi is slightly more rough. Good job, X200 Ultra, the same on X100 Ultra. Not very accurate here on Xiaomi, some slight hint on weirdness is here on X200 Ultra, not sure about this part on X100. Again, everything on all of the portrait mode shots will be the same. 30% smoothness slider on Oppo, 50% on Xiaomi, and on both of the Vivos we will use natural preset. And what I can see that X200 Ultra applies less face retouching in this mode, despite me setting it to the natural. Now quickly more crop. On the main sensors, 50 megapixels focal distance. Can we see a huge advantage on the X200 Ultra? The same situation without any zooms. I just love the image that Xiaomi renders. It is so nice, my favorite look. Hairs looks good on both Vivos. Oppo is the best in separating subjects. And on Xiaomi I see some hints on the roughness. I feel like Oppo and X200 Ultra made a better job than Xiaomi and X100 Ultra. For example, this part, very rough. Looks like scissors were used to cut this subject into this background. Alright, first telephoto lens. Oh my Overlord. Alright my friends, I'm out. No more words needed. Just so good. All these smartphones are so good. Just pick your favorite. They are so good in photography. I love what Oppo does here. It simulates natural depth of field from DSLR and mirrorless cameras. So the transition between fake background and real subject is very smooth here. Something went wrong on X200 Ultra on telephoto lens. I can see some artifacts, and cutout of hair is not very smooth. X100 Ultra did a lot better job here. And whoa, oh, alright again, I'm out, no comments needed. So good results. My friends, just pick your favorite. I love these results on all of them. I think that I don't even want to critique any of them. Just astonishing. And the most beautiful and interesting part, that they all are very beautiful, but completely different in their approach. In how all these phones edit the image, in their philosophy, and in the end, in the final result. Really, just pick what you like. Alright, maybe actually I need to address some stuff. I can see that this telephoto lens on X200 Pro, for some reason, have some artifacts when it tries to cut out hairs, and looks like it only exists on telephoto lens. Maybe it will be fixed in the firmware updates. But right now, it is what it is. But to tell the truth, I suggest you to turn off fake bokeh on these large HP9 telephoto lenses, because it will give you background blur, so-called bokeh, naturally, because of the size of the sensor, and it does not need the fake one. These four phones use completely different style. Looks like Oppo is the most natural and organic. Xiaomi uses the most amount of editing and computations, while both Oppos are kinda in the middle, with X100 Ultra leaning towards Xiaomi, and X200 Ultra does not use that much of face retouching for some reason in this mode, thus leans towards Oppo. But I love all of them. I cannot pick the winner here, because I love all of them. because all of them are that good. But definitely right now I do not recommend to use fake background blur on the telephoto lens in portrait mode on X200 Ultra. For some reason it gets tons of artifacts. Just turn it off, and you will get very beautiful images and portraits. Alright, let's transition into the night. It will be our last section. We're gonna test extreme low light condition, extreme night mode. Remember, Vivo x200 Ultra is using the largest ultra-wide lens. Even without any zooms, we can see some advantage. This area has more grass and more information. But let's zoom in. Yeah, definitely we can see some advantage. But on the other hand, Vivo x100 Ultra is not bad either, because despite being more bright, it still looks very sort of artificial, like it is drawn by pencils. To tell the truth, this light part, I actually prefer Oppo. I feel like it is more organic, with better colors. Of course, shadow parts are very mushy and too dark, but I feel like it is a lot more realistic. Xiaomi feels like it is poor at night with this new 14mm ultra-wide, and this is a definitely step backwards for me. I don't understand why we have to give up all 2mm, lots of field of view, if image quality is not that much improved. It is only for you to decide, is this level of image worth it for you? So, now let's test main sensors, but this time stress test X200 Ultra's ultra-wide lens a little bit more. We will use 28mm. Also very nice focal distance. It can easily be used almost everywhere. Street, architectural, people. In theory, X200 Ultra should have a disadvantage, because it uses more crop on ultra-wide, while other phones will crop only slightly and on main 1-inch sensors, from 24mm to 28. Also this time I will use Sony ZV-10. Small poor APS-C camera with Sigma 2.8 lens. Actually, I have listed this camera on sale right now. I want to get rid of it ASAP. I'm very unpleased with the handling experience and with the results. In some occasions, especially in low light, this camera is actually more worse than smartphones that easily can outperform it. And of course, let's not forget full-frame Canon camera. It has IBIS. It means in-body image stabilization. The sensor inside is moving and stabilizing the shot, the same as on all of these smartphones. Sony ZV-10 lacks this feature. If your lens does not have a stabilizer, you are pretty much done. You will absolutely need a tripod for shots like this, but here all shots will be handheld. I tried my best as I could to make these shots possible with 1 second exposure. And as I can see, Oppo improved night mode a lot. I kinda like these results. Definitely a big improvement over last year. Xiaomi is also nice, but it is a little bit soft. On X200 Ultra, not very surprising, it is in a disadvantage, because to achieve 28mm, you need to crop in on ultra-wide. Vivo X100 Ultra is very nice, very sharp, lots of colors. Oh my god. Oh, poor little Sony is struggling. We have lots of movement in shot. Definitely 1 second exposure, even on such distances, is impossible handheld, without any stabilization in camera or lens. And whoa, this is why you want to buy a full frame. It is handheld, 1 second exposure, 12,000 ISO levels. Actually, it looks like I even overexposed it, so I could easily cut it in half, make it only a half-second exposure, or even I could lower ISO levels. For example, I could use 6000 ISO to get more clean and detailed image. Because you see, even if your camera has very nice image stabilization, and you have the strongest and the most stable hands in the Wild West, you will still face one big problem that you cannot overcome, and it is movement in shot of your subjects. For example, people walking or running, or foliage and leaves waving on the wind. If the wind blows, branches are moving, creating you the blurry movement in your shot. And it is not just mirrorless camera stuff. Everything that is very blurred out in the branches of these trees is just a wind moving those trees, and you're getting these trails. And it is unavoidable on very long shutter speeds. For example, if you are exposing your image for half a second, and even longer, you will eventually get movement in your shots from everything moving in the world. People, animals, grass, foliage. But definitely for the most part, to get more usable image, it is better to use a tripod, even if you have a steady hands. But sometimes you don't feel like carrying one with you all day long. And in this situation, it is very nice to have a convenience. Now, in theory, the situation should be flipped. We are using 1:1 readout from the optical 35mm on main sensor on the X200 Ultra, and all other smartphones are cropping in. Oh my, poor little Sony. It is painful to watch, even without zooming in. Oh, alright, and what we see here? And I don't see, right now, that much of a drastic difference. And big advantage over X100 Ultra. Maybe slightly in some parts, but not by a mile. And the more you buy, the more you save. Oh, wrong video. The more you spend your hard-earned money on unnecessary overpriced gear, the better results you will get. Poor little small APS-C Sony camera. We spent lots of time together, but I hope someone will buy you very soon. I am tired of you. To see more difference between these two Vivos, we actually need to zoom in more. Maybe, if we zoom in that much, I can see some advantage. Image is more detailed, but more smoothed out at the same time, because of this new way of editing images. I'm kinda having a hard time to find very obvious benefits over X100 Ultra. Xiaomi is little bit soft. Oppo, very nice progress in terms of extreme low light conditions. By the way, keep in mind that in reality I could not see any of this with my naked eye. It was so dark, almost pitch black conditions. It was literally nothing over there when you looked at these parts. Images are that bright just because of turned on night mode. And on mirrorless conventional cameras, I'm using extremely high 12,000 ISO plus 1 second exposure. But in reality, it was just black darkness. Let's test first telephoto lenses. Both Oppo and Xiaomi can utilize these lenses, while both X200 Ultra and 100 Ultra from Vivo, they are struggling in this situation. They're using crop from main sensors. It is very strange because why not? Sony feels bad. Canon R5 Mark II is flexing with its IBIS. Alright, in this situation, first telephoto lenses on these both two guys. And actually, when we get slightly more light here, X200 Ultra was able to utilize this telephoto lens. Maybe because it has slightly brighter aperture, maybe because it is a software feature, who knows? But X100 Ultra is still using crop from main sensor, unfortunately. Sony's ZV-10 moans and screams for help. It has a panic attack. Poor little Sony. Insane performance from this HP9 on Vivo X200 Ultra. To tell the truth, it is kinda insane. Keep in mind, it is pitch black darkness. All of this was not visible to the naked eye in reality. We are using 85mm handheld telephoto lens at night, small walkie-talkie devices that fits in our pockets. If you really think about it, it is kinda crazy. We are seeing here the battle between raw hardware powers versus software clever trickery. Only one shot from the big sensor inside very powerful camera versus software multi-shot stitching, computational photography from the small sensors inside smartphones. That's why I want computational photography, and especially computational raw photography, to be implemented in the conventional mirrorless cameras. But unfortunately, looks like real camera manufacturers will never add this to our cameras. They are just too afraid to lose their market. That way, who will buy multi-$1,000 worth of gear? But actually some cameras do have computational raw photography. For example, Panasonic cameras. They have a feature that is called Live View Composition. It is like night mode on smartphones. It exposes the frame for a very long period of time without overexposing highlights. It is very useful for night photography and light trails painting. Also, it has pixel shift mode. The sensor inside the camera, by using IBIS, shifts multiple times, stitch multiple images together. So your 24 megapixels Panasonic camera can give you 100 megapixels raw photo that you can edit in your raw editing software. Pretty cool. But all other major manufacturers, Canon, Sony, Nikon, they just does not care, like at all. And I have the feeling that it is on purpose. But luckily their sales went down drastically. Maybe it will teach them something. But I have a feeling that they are ready to die on that hill. Now let's quickly test second telephoto lenses. Actually, despite very dark conditions, both Oppo and Xiaomi can utilize their second telephoto lenses. We already saw this on Vivo. They are both just using crop from main sensor. On Sony, I have actually increased the shutter speed to get more stable image and less movement in shot, and increased ISO to 32,000, while on Canon, everything is the same. But looks like it's just too dark to expect anything usable in this situation. So the last example, second telephoto lens, in slightly more better, but still very extreme and almost pitch black conditions. Very interesting that Oppo is able to utilize this telephoto lens, but it is smaller and darker than HP9 on Vivo x100 Ultra. So to tell the truth, I believe that it is just a software limitations. On Sony I have increased ISO and made faster shutter speed, but even without any zooming in, I can see that image is falling apart. At that point, why would I bother to use it instead of a smartphone? Crazy stuff how situations flipped over these years. Telephoto lenses at night, pitch black dark conditions. Smartphones are better than APS-C cameras. I am very impressed by Oppo in this situation. Vivo x200 Ultra is very nice also, but it looks not slightly, to tell the truth, it looks very fake. Very artificial, but I will take this any day of the week. Over this soft digital crop from main sensor, and over this poor little noise generator machine, Sony ZV-10. So I think it is battle between Vivo x200 Ultra and Oppo, but to tell the truth, Xiaomi is looking nice also. So it is a huge improvement for all of these devices, Vivo, Xiaomi and Oppo. Good step forward in terms of night photography, or how Samsung likes to call it, nightography. But here is another problem for conventional mirrorless cameras. As you can see, this part is already out of focus because of small f2.8 aperture on this 70mm. The focus is on the trees in the background, but our foreground is not in focus. Our plane of focus is just too shallow, too narrow. To mitigate this, you actually need, again, a tripod to close your aperture to f8 or even f10. That way you will get both foreground and background in focus. Again, it comes down to inconvenience of using tripod, taking multiple shots, and then stitch them in post manually, spending lots of time just for one single shot. So my friends, that's it for today, but please keep in mind that this is not final in-depth battle. During this and next 2 months there will be a lot more videos, individual review of each of these smartphones, lots of street photography and videography, educational video about photo and video, and of course multi-hours full in-depth interdimensional battle between all of these smartphones, photo, video and audio comparisons. Subscribe if you have not already. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the cosmos and in the next videos. This is not the end.